She vanished without a trace near the farm in 1997, just steps from the grain silo. For nearly 3 decades, her name was a whisper, her face fading from memory. But when a drone flew overhead in 2025, what it captured cracked the silence wide open. You won't want to miss this story. But before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a video like this one. I remember the night. Lily vanished, like the way you remember a song you used to hum before you knew it was sad. It was late September, the kind of night where the heat lingers just a little too long and the cornfields seem to whisper things if you're alone long enough. She had just turned 17 2 weeks earlier. Mama made a cake shaped like a sunflower, and Daddy gifted her that silver locket with our initials scratched into it by hand. That night, she was supposed to go to the Crawford boys' party, just past the ridge where the fence sagged and the trees thinned out into open gravel. I watched her go from the porch swing, wearing jeans with a rip on one knee, and that faded denim jacket she always claimed made her look like a singer. She didn't look back. She rarely did. Mama told her to be home by midnight. Daddy didn't say much. I stayed up, watching old cartoons with the sound turned low. At 11:30, I thought I saw her flashlight bouncing down the dirt road near the silo, but when I blinked, it was gone. Just shadows and corn. We never saw her again. By morning, Mama's hands were shaking as she poured coffee she never drank. Daddy walked down to the barn without a word. I remember running along the ditches and calling her name until my throat ached. The sheriff showed up around noon. He asked a lot of questions about who Lily might have been with, whether she'd ever run away before, if we had any fights at home. Mama got defensive, like she was being blamed. Daddy didn't speak at all. They searched the fields, the creek, the old Miller barn, even the woods behind the churchyard. Dogs barked near the silo once, but nothing came of it. No footprints, no torn fabric, no dropped phone, just a silence that settled like dust on everything we owned. They called it a cold case by the next spring. People whispered. Some said Lily got in a car with someone passing through. Others said she'd had secrets. The silo stood there like a metal tomb, untouched and rusting. I passed it every day on my way to school, trying not to look at it, but always feeling its shadow. I kept waiting for her to come back, maybe one night while we were all asleep, slipping in through the kitchen door, smiling like it was all some wild adventure. But the porch light we left on burned out eventually, and Lily never did. The search lasted weeks, but it felt like years stretched thin across the skin of each day. Neighbors brought casseroles and prayers, but even their kindness felt like something borrowed, like they were afraid it could be their daughter next. The sheriff came back every couple of days, his boots trailing dust into our kitchen as he asked the same questions in different orders, like repetition might make a different answer appear. Mama stayed mostly in Lily's room, folding and unfolding her clothes as if straight lines might summon her back. I caught her once sniffing Lily's pillow and whispering something I couldn't hear. Daddy spent his time outside, pretending to fix things that weren't broken. The barn door creaked more than it ever had before, but he oiled it anyway, over and over like it was the only thing he could control. I kept going to school because no one told me not to. People stared, not cruelly, just in that way where their curiosity turned them quiet. They'd look at me like I was half haunted, the ghost of someone still living. I stopped eating lunch. I stopped answering questions in class. I kept looking out windows. I remember one evening the sky turned this impossible orange, and for a second I thought it looked like the exact color of Lily's favorite scarf. I ran down the road toward the silo, heart pounding like a wild drum, but of course it was nothing, just sunset and corn. The sheriff finally told us they had no leads. They'd interviewed the Crawford boy, who claimed Lily left the party alone around 10. No fights, no drama, She just stepped off the porch and disappeared into the night like smoke. No one saw a car. No one followed. The story dried up in the newspapers by Thanksgiving. The flyers faded on telephone poles. Her face, once printed in black and white on every surface in town, became just another memory with curled edges. I tried to talk to Mama about her one night, just mention Lily's name out loud, but she flinched like I'd slapped her. Daddy started keeping a bottle under the sink. I told myself over and over that Lily was out there somewhere, walking along a highway, living under a new name, something wild and free. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up from dreams where I was standing in the middle of the cornfield, and the silence would press in so thick it felt like it had weight. And somewhere in that silence, I swore I could hear her crying, just faint, just once, then gone again. There's something cruel about a place that holds your sister's name in its silence. Every time the wind moved through the corn, I imagined it carried some echo of Lily, like the land itself knew what happened and just wouldn't say. In the months that followed her disappearance, the silo became something different. Not just a piece of the farm, not just a landmark with rusted ribs and a roof that leaked when it rained, but a shadow that watched us. I used to climb up to the hayloft in the barn just to get a better look at it, to see if anything had changed, if anything stirred, but it never did. Just sat there, tall and hollow, like a coffin with no lid. People still whispered about Lily, mostly at the grocery store or outside church. Words like ran off, pregnant, drugs. None of them fit her. Lily had plans. College. Veterinary school. She used to leave little notes on my pillow, hand-drawn cartoons of me riding a horse or holding a diploma. She believed in things. She believed in me. And now, she was just gone, and the world had the audacity to keep spinning. I remember one evening, about 6 months later, I found Mama in the kitchen, slicing carrots so aggressively the blades stuck in the cutting board. She didn't look up. She just said, without turning her head, "If she's dead, then let her rest. And if she's not, then she better come back before I bury her in my heart." I didn't know what to say to that. No one ever tells you what to say when grief stops pretending to be sadness and starts curdling into something like rage. Daddy barely spoke by then. He'd go into the fields before dawn and come back long after dark. I watched him once from the porch, just standing near the edge of the silo with his hand on the metal wall, like he was listening. I wanted to ask him if he heard her too. I wanted to ask if he ever dreamed what I did. Lily in a white dress, running through corn that never ended, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. In town, the police stopped returning our calls. Said there was nothing new, no suspects, no evidence. Just a single footprint near the silo they couldn't match to anyone. Too worn, too shallow, too lonely. I started to think maybe Lily had never left at all. Maybe she was somewhere close, somewhere just out of reach, and we were all too blind or too scared to look the truth in the face. I remember finding one of her earrings under the porch steps that spring, the pearl kind Mama gave her for her birthday. I held it in my hand until my palm went numb. I never told anyone. Just slipped it into the small jewelry box she left behind and closed the lid. Every time I passed the silo, I looked up. Sometimes I swore I saw a shape in one of the upper slats, a flicker, a suggestion, like the building was breathing her name. I never told anyone that either. Some things aren't meant to be spoken out loud. Some things live in the cracks between memory and madness. And I was learning, slowly, painfully, to live in those cracks. The first real storm after Lily disappeared came on a Sunday, loud and uninvited, like the sky had finally gotten tired of holding back its grief. I remember standing at the back door, watching the clouds twist and churn over the field like they were fighting each other. Rain hit the porch roof in thick, angry bursts, and I could hear the gutters wheezing from years of neglect. Mama sat in her chair by the window, not knitting like she used to, just staring into the distance, her hands resting in her lap like forgotten tools. Daddy hadn't come back from the feed store, and I kept glancing down the road, half wishing he'd roll up with Lily in the passenger seat, soaked to the bone, smiling like she had just gone out for a long walk and gotten caught in the downpour. I had that thought more than I should have. I think those tiny, impossible daydreams that you know are lies but still let bloom because they're softer than the truth. I walked out into the storm anyway, barefoot, the gravel sharp and wet beneath my feet. The cornfields trembled in the wind, bending like old men in prayer, and the silo stood taller than all of it, unbothered, its metal skin slick with water. I got closer than I ever had before, past the rusted fencing and the keep out sign Daddy nailed up when I was 10. It wasn't locked. The sliding door groaned when I pushed it open, the sound swallowed by thunder. Inside it was darker than I expected, not just the absence of light, but something deeper, like the air itself didn't want to be disturbed. My breath echoed strangely in that silence. Dust clung to the beams. The floor was layered in old straw and bits of husk, and in the center, a faint stain had bloomed outward like a bruise. I told myself it was just water damage. I told myself a lot of things. But then I noticed something strange, the tiniest bit of pink, barely visible beneath a broken slat. I reached down and pulled out what looked like a piece of fabric, torn and knotted, faded like it had been washed too many times. It took me a second to recognize the pattern. A tiny blue flower. Lily's favorite pajama top. I backed out of the silo fast, my legs shaking, the rain slapping my face like it was punishing me for looking. I didn't tell Mama. I didn't tell Daddy. I buried it under my bed, beneath a loose floorboard, where I kept the rest of her things I found or couldn't let go of. I don't know why I didn't say anything. Maybe because saying it would make it real. Maybe because part of me thought, if I held on to it quietly, she'd come back for it herself. That storm passed like they always do, but it left something behind in me. A splinter of knowing. From then on, every time I passed the silo, I didn't just look. I listened. They said it was probably just a coyote that took the hens, but I knew better, and so did Daddy, even if he didn't say it out loud. That spring, things started vanishing from the farm in ways that didn't make sense. First it was the hens, then the screwdriver set from the barn, and later the small red radio I kept by the window that only ever played static and old country ballads. Daddy blamed raccoons. Mama just looked out the window a little longer each day, like she was expecting Lily to walk back through the field in one of her old sun hats. But I started noticing patterns. The barn door would be open when no one had gone inside. The wheelbarrow would be turned slightly, just a few inches off from how we left it. And once, I found a spoon halfway buried in the dirt near the corn rows, bent backwards like someone had tried to dig with it. The dog, Murphy, wouldn't go near the silo anymore. He used to trot along the edge of the fence, sniffing around like he owned the place. Now he stood stiff whenever we got close, ears low, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. I began waking up at night to the sound of footsteps, soft and irregular, like someone pacing in the gravel outside. Not heavy, like Daddy's boots, not light, like Mama's slippers. Just steady, like someone thinking. One night, curiosity got the better of me, and I slipped out of bed and crept to the back porch. The air smelled like wet earth and smoke, even though there was no fire. The moon hung low, more orange than silver, and cast long shadows from the barn to the edge of the silo. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement, fast, disappearing behind the silo like a whisper ducking around a secret. I didn't call out. I didn't move. My breath slowed without me realizing it. Then I heard it a sound like breathing, rough and uneven, not close, but not far either. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't an animal, it was human, or close enough to human to make me freeze. I waited for what felt like forever. Nothing happened. Nothing came out. Eventually, I slipped back into the house, locking the door behind me with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, the mind playing tricks in the dark, but in the morning there were small footprints in the mud, leading from the silo to the edge of the cornfield, and they weren't mine. They were bare. No shoe treads, just soles, toes slightly curled, like the person was walking on cold earth. Daddy said maybe it was just some trespasser passing through. But I could tell by the way his jaw clenched and how he checked the locks 3 times that night that he didn't believe that either. After that, the farm felt different. The silence stretched further. Even the birds seemed to keep their distance. It was like something had shifted, like something had come home. It was a Sunday morning when I finally worked up the nerve to check the inside of the silo, the same one Lily was last seen near, the same one Mama wouldn't even glance at anymore when she hung laundry. The air was thick with the kind of spring dampness that clings to your shirt and makes your hair stick to your neck, and something about the silence felt heavy, like even the birds knew better than to fill it. I didn't tell Daddy or Mama what I was doing. I just said I'd be out back checking the fencing. And then I slipped away, boots soft on the grass, heart loud in my chest. The silo was older than I remembered, rust bleeding down its side like old tears, and the door groaned when I pulled it open, slow and steady so it wouldn't scream. It smelled like mildew and thyme inside, and for a moment I thought I saw movement near the back. But it was just dust catching the light in one of those lazy sunbeams that somehow pierce through steel and silence. I stepped inside, careful not to trip on the uneven concrete floor, my breath catching with each step like I was walking into a memory that hadn't quite settled. At first, it looked empty. Just like always, piles of forgotten tools, an old ladder leaning against the far wall, and the grain chute sealed shut with a heavy iron clamp. But then I noticed something that stopped me cold. A blanket, not ours, folded neatly in the corner. Next to it, a small stack of food wrappers, granola bars, fruit cups, the kind of snacks Mama used to pack for us in summer when we'd run off to the creek. And beside them, a small notebook. I didn't touch it, not at first. I just stared, as if doing so might make it disappear, might prove I was imagining things. But it didn't vanish. It stayed. I knelt down, hands shaking, and picked it up. The first page was blank. So was the second. But on the third, in thin, careful handwriting, it said, Day 3. Still here. Still listening. I don't think they know I'm alive. My mouth went dry. I flipped through more pages, slow and terrified. Most were just ramblings, dates, scratched out lines, crude drawings of the silo interior. But on the last page, written so faint I almost missed it, were the words, I hear them outside. They call my name like they know me. But they aren't Mama. They aren't real. I sat there for a long time, the book heavy in my hands, the air pressing in around me like the walls were leaning closer. I wanted to scream, or cry, or run, but all I could do was whisper her name, Lily, and feel it vanish into the stale air like a secret too old to echo. Then, from behind me, just outside the open silo door, I heard gravel shift. I turned, but no one was there. I told myself it was probably just the wind or a rabbit darting through the gravel, but that was a lie I couldn't even swallow. Something had moved. I knew the sound too well, that slow crunch of weight over old driveway stone, too deliberate to be a breeze, and too heavy for a squirrel or fox. I stood frozen in the mouth of the silo, clutching the notebook to my chest like it could shield me, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I stepped out slowly, one boot at a time, scanning the horizon, just flat earth, rustling wheat, and the distant shape of the house blinking at me like it wasn't real. No figures. No trucks. No one. But the feeling didn't leave. It crawled down my back and settled into my spine like a shiver made of memory. I looked at the dirt near the silo, the kind that hadn't been disturbed in years, and that's when I saw it a footprint, faint but fresh, heading away from the door. Barefoot. Not mine. The toes had sunk slightly, like the person was dragging their heel. I followed it with my eyes until it disappeared into the wheat, and then I looked down at my shaking hands, still gripping Lily's notebook like it might dissolve. I ran to the house, faster than I'd run in years, slamming the screen door behind me, yelling for Mama. She was in the kitchen, hands deep in a bowl of biscuit dough, and when she looked up at me, her face drained of all color. I didn't have to say it. She knew. I dropped the notebook on the table and watched her eyes scan the pages, one by one, her lips parting but no sound coming out. "Where did you find this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "In the silo," I said. That was all. Just those 4 words, but they hit her like a hammer. She sat down slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, even though they were still covered in flour, like she didn't know what else to do. I wanted her to scream, to tell me it was a prank, to say Lily had run away and this was some sick joke. But she didn't. She just looked at me, tears building, and whispered, "I told them. I told them not to search the silo. I knew." I stared at her, throat tight, and said, "You never told me that." She nodded, slow and hollow. "I thought it was protecting you. I thought maybe if I pretended hard enough she'd just come back." Her voice broke, but she never did. We sat in silence, just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of something ancient slipping loose between us. I didn't say it, but I thought it, loud and clear. Maybe Lily never left this farm at all. The next morning I returned to the silo alone, before the sun had fully lifted its head over the fields, armed with nothing but a flashlight, a recorder app on my phone, and the kind of stubborn fear that doesn't stop you but pushes you forward. The silo's metal walls groaned with the morning wind, each creak like a door half opening somewhere in my mind. I stepped inside, this time tracing the same steps I had yesterday, but slower, more deliberate, as if Lily herself might be watching, waiting. I stared at the cement floor, then followed the line of bolts and rust trails to the corner where the notebook had fallen. But this time, something new caught my eye, a seam in the wall I hadn't noticed before, just a thin hairline split running vertically along the far side, like 2 panels pressed together with something breathing between them. I reached out and touched it. It was cold, and when I pushed gently, the wall gave a little, like something wasn't entirely bolted shut. I fumbled in the beam of the flashlight, dragging my fingers along the seam until I found what felt like a latch, rusted but real. I pulled. It resisted. I pulled harder. With a groan like something waking from sleep, the panel cracked open just enough to let the beam of my flashlight slip through, and that was when I stopped breathing. There was a hollow behind the wall, a narrow crawl space, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze into. And inside, dust hanging like breath in winter, were shelves, not grain storage, not tools, shelves. Lined with old cassette tapes, labeled by date, starting from June of 1997. The month Lily vanished. My hands shook as I reached for the first one, the label almost too faded to read. I turned it over and noticed something written in marker across the back. property of RH. I had no idea who that was. I pulled out another tape, then another. Some were blank. Some were labeled Barn South, Window Cam, Silo Overhead. My skin crawled. I turned, shone the light upward, and that's when I saw it, a small dome near the ceiling, like an old surveillance fixture, long dead, maybe still alive. I stepped back too quickly and knocked something metal off a shelf. It clattered and rolled to my feet. I picked it up. A hair clip. Simple. Plastic. Cracked. Pink. I didn't need to ask whose it was. The walls felt tighter now, the air thick. I grabbed 2 tapes and shoved them into my backpack, sealed the panel, and stumbled out of the silo into the rising light, gasping like I'd been underwater. Mama saw me from the porch and didn't say a word as I passed her, just stared like she'd seen a ghost walk out of a grave. In a way, she had, because something about this farm was never meant to be unearthed. And I just found the first nail in the coffin. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with those 2 tapes on the quilt beside me, like they might start whispering if I looked away. My hands smelled like rust and dust and something I didn't want to name. I kept picturing that hidden room in the silo, the way the light had caught on the cassette labels, the way that hair clip had felt in my hand like holding someone's memory, sharp and delicate. I borrowed Dad's old tape deck from the garage, the one we used to play Christmas music on when I was little. It took a few tries to get it working, but when it finally clicked into place, the sound that came out wasn't music. It was static. Long stretches of it, broken up by clicks, shuffles, sometimes what might have been voices, faint and far away like they were coming through water. I turned the volume up. At first, it was just white noise, the hum of machinery, maybe the whir of a generator. Then a voice, male, low, methodical, listing something. Monday, window view, no motion, 1740. Then another pause, more static. Tuesday, girl returned to barn, 1731. My stomach turned. I clicked the second tape in. This one started immediately with a different sound. A girl humming, faint, high-pitched, like she was trying to soothe herself. It went on for nearly a minute before a door creaked and her voice stopped. Heavy footsteps, then nothing. Silence, long and cruel. I couldn't tell if it was Lily. I didn't want to assume. But something about that humming clung to me like smoke. I played it again, and on the third time, I noticed it a voice in the background, layered beneath hers, not speaking but breathing. Not rhythmic, panicked, like someone was afraid to breathe too loudly. I pulled the tape out and set it gently on the desk, like it was sacred or cursed. Maybe both. I couldn't bring myself to tell Mama. Not yet. I needed answers before I shattered her again. I needed to know who RH was. I needed to know why those tapes were hidden in a room built into a grain silo. And I needed to know if anyone else ever knew about it. I sat there until dawn, the sky blooming orange beyond the blinds, and all I could think about was Lily, 17 years old, walking home, probably never knowing someone was watching, recording, waiting. I packed the tapes up in a shoebox, labeled them with the date, and slid them under my bed. But even buried, I could still hear that humming in my head, like it had wound itself around my ribs and was trying to pull something loose. I wasn't sure what I had stepped into, but I knew this wasn't about an accident. This was something older, something planned, something recorded, and it wasn't over yet. I took the tapes to someone who wouldn't laugh me out of the room. Deputy Warren Matlock had retired 6 years ago, but still came into town for coffee and crossword puzzles most mornings, and he was one of the few people who had known Lily personally. He used to help her with 4-H projects back when she was training her lambs for the fair, and I remembered once hearing him say she was the only teenager he'd ever met who called him sir, like she meant it. I waited until his second cup of coffee before I sat across from him at the diner and slid the shoebox across the sticky formica table. He didn't touch it at first, just looked at me like I'd brought him a ghost in a paper bag. I told him where I'd found it, described the hidden room in the silo, the camera mount, the cot, the tapes. I didn't sugarcoat it. His face changed, slowly, like someone flipping through old photographs they'd buried under a floorboard. He finally opened the box and looked down at the tapes like they might burn him. "This one," I said, tapping the one labeled the 16th of August, 1997. "That's the night Lily disappeared." He didn't ask why I thought so. He just nodded, lips tight, and said we should listen together. Back at his house, in his cluttered study that smelled like pipe tobacco and liniment cream, he fed the tape into a cleaner deck than mine. When it clicked on, the room filled with the same static, the same eerie hum of machines. Then came the voice again. "Saturday. Girl agitated. Attempted exit. Restrained. 17:59. Warren's hand clenched on the arm of his chair. I could see his jaw working. Girl cried for mother. Refused food. 17:65. I didn't even know what that time meant. There was no 17:65 on a clock. Warren clicked pause. "Military-style timestamp," he muttered. "They round it differently. This isn't some backwoods creep. This island. Something else." He stood up, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a worn leather notebook. Inside, he had kept clippings from the case, notes, even photos I had never seen before. One of them showed a blurred figure walking near the silo 3 days after Lily vanished. It had been dismissed as a local farmer, checking the fence. "I always thought there was more to this," Warren said, almost to himself. But nobody wanted to hear it. They were quick to close the case, said she probably ran away. I asked him who had access to that silo in 1997. He said only the landowners, a feed supplier, and one man hired short-term for repairs that summer, a name I didn't recognize. And when I asked for it, Warren flipped through his notes and said it out loud. Roger Hayfield. My blood ran cold. R.H. I had found his initials carved into the cot frame. I asked if he was still alive. Warren shook his head. Died in 2005. Tractor accident. But then he added something that made the room feel colder. Before he died, he was investigated for keeping surveillance equipment in his trailer. Cameras, cables, tapes. Case never went anywhere. I realized I wasn't just chasing a mystery. I was chasing something that had been buried on purpose. And the people who buried it weren't finished being silent. After Warren said his name, I couldn't sleep that night. Roger Hayfield. I kept hearing it over and over in my head, rolling like a loose wheel down a hill, building speed, colliding with every bit of normal I thought I understood about my hometown. I sat up in bed until the sun cracked through the blinds, and when I finally stood, it wasn't to make coffee, it was to dig. I went through old county records, school board rosters, anything archived online or at the library, and I found what I was afraid I might. Roger Hayfield had been hired in June 1997 by the Hart family themselves to repair the grain silo's cracked base and replace corroded equipment. His name appeared once, signed in blue ink on an invoice for $300 and a check cashed 2 days later. Then nothing. No follow-up, no inspection sheet, no signature on any exit logs from the property. He had vanished from paper the moment his job ended, and I realized Maybe that job hadn't ended at all. Warren and I returned to the silo that evening. The sun was dropping, and the field around it glowed orange, like it didn't know how long it had been complicit in silence. We didn't talk much, just brought gloves, tools, and flashlights. We pried open the narrow crawl space beneath the cement platform, hoping that what lay behind that wall of rust and shadows could finally give us clarity. There was more. A small wooden cabinet bolted to the back wall, padlocked and half rotted through. It came apart easier than expected. Inside were items wrapped in oilcloth, a silver locket, a pair of ballet shoes, no bigger than a spread hand, and a folder of grainy photographs. They were timestamps. Images taken from a mounted camera, pointed downward through slats in the ceiling. We saw Lily in several frames. Alive, gaunt, huddled on the cot with the blanket wrapped tight around her like she was trying to disappear inside it. Each image had a number scrawled at the bottom, not dates but sequences, as if she had been catalogued. Warren turned pale, and I felt something in my chest twist, like a rope being pulled tight. There was one last image, separated from the rest. It showed the cot empty. No blanket, no shoes. Just an indentation in the mattress and a trail of something wet leading to the hatch door. Warren didn't say a word, just turned away and gripped the doorframe until his knuckles went white. I didn't ask if he was okay. None of us were. We sealed the items into evidence bags and called in the sheriff's office. They didn't want it to be real, but the folder spoke louder than their denial. DNA testing confirmed the hair strands on the blanket belonged to Lily Hart, 28 years buried under rotting wood and silence, and now, finally, her name had breath again. But I knew we were only halfway down the path. We still didn't know how she got out, or if she ever really did, because there were no records of Roger Hayfield owning a camera, no fingerprints but hers. And there was still one more tape we hadn't played. The tape was inside a cracked black cassette case at the bottom of the cabinet, buried beneath the cloth and photos like someone had tried to forget it even existed. It had no label, no date, just a small scratch across the front like a single tally mark etched in plastic. We didn't play it right away. Warren took it home, said he needed to prepare himself, and I understood. But 3 days later, we sat in his den, blinds drawn. That old camcorder, connected to an outdated RCA converter rigged to his television, both of us barely breathing. When the screen lit up, it was dark, grainy, and muffled, like the air itself was heavy inside the recording. At first, all we could see was a single beam of light, flickering in a circle, probably from a flashlight. Then the frame steadied, and we heard breathing, not panicked but tired, like someone at the edge of exhaustion. The camera tilted upward, revealing the interior of the silo from below Lily's point of view. Her voice came in soft, shaking, barely audible. "If someone finds this, please tell my mom. I'm sorry. I didn't run away. I swear, I never meant to." And then the sentence cut off like her throat caught. The camera dropped sideways, and the frame showed her feet, dirt-caked and bare. For the next minute, there was silence. Then, suddenly, footsteps, heavy, measured, coming down the silo ladder. The breathing changed. Quicker, afraid. She whispered again. "I can hear him. He comes when I cry, so I won't cry." It was the kind of line that doesn't leave you, that wraps around your ribs and settles in your gut like a stone. The camera was picked up and pointed toward the corner of the room, where the hatch door stood ajar. A hand appeared briefly in the frame small, trembling before the lens turned black. For a while, all we could hear was static. Then the camera clicked off. Warren didn't say anything. He just rewound the tape and played it again, like repetition would change the ending. I sat there staring at that screen, thinking about a girl alone beneath the earth, trying to document her own disappearance with the only tool she had. And for a moment, I hated every adult who didn't look harder, every officer who wrote her off, every neighbor who said she was probably off with a boy. The sheriff's office took the tape as evidence, logged it, and promised to follow up. But I saw the way they looked at us, like we had cracked open something better left buried. Still, the tape didn't lie. It was her voice, her words, her witness statement after almost 3 decades of silence. The final minute of that tape was pure darkness, but Lily's voice came in one last time. Not scared. Not even angry. Just certain. "I'm still here," she said. "Even if no one comes, I'm still here." And that's when I knew we hadn't found her. Not yet, but we were close. It was the silence that haunted me the most after that tape. The long ache between answers. The way every official we brought it to paused before saying they would look into it. Their eyes shifting, like they already wanted to forget. But I couldn't. I didn't. And neither did Warren. We started digging into everything: missing persons, property lines, backlogs of regional permits filed in the 92nd, and in one grainy satellite photo from 1996, we noticed something odd. Behind the silo, tucked into the thicket near the tree line, was a structure that didn't match any known buildings on the Hart family property. A narrow rectangular shape, barely visible, and gone in every photo afterward. We hiked out that same week, tracing the route with an old compass and a printed map, stepping over dead branches and decades of moss. When we found it, my breath caught. It was a storm shelter, mostly sunken now, overgrown and choked with vines, but the door was still there. Metal, bolted shut with a rusted padlock. No markings, no welcome. We didn't force it open that night. We came back with help, an independent team of forensic volunteers, one of whom specialized in ground-penetrating radar. They scanned the site and confirmed it. Beneath the structure was a chamber, roughly the size of a small room, sealed from every side except that single rusted door. It took hours to get inside. When we finally opened it, the air that escaped was cold and stale, the kind that hadn't moved in years. Inside were remnants, blankets, a flashlight, a notebook half burned, and a pile of children's books. Not recent, weathered, faded, like someone had lived there, or at least been kept there. There was no body, no trace of Lily. But on the wall, scrawled in black marker, was a message. "You almost found me. Please try again." I read it twice, then 3 more times, until the words burned into the backs of my eyes. Warren stood behind me, frozen, like his soul had just caught up with his body and realized what we were seeing. We were standing inside her second prison. The silo hadn't been the only place she'd been hidden. This shelter had no official record, no zoning, no construction permit. We checked every registry, every blueprint. It was built illegally, buried on purpose. And if it weren't for that drone photo and a whisper from the past, it would have stayed forgotten. I don't know how long Lily lived in that space. Weeks, maybe longer. But what chilled me most was the layer of dust on the books and the fact that one of them, a children's fairy tale, had fresh fingerprints on its cover. Someone had been there after her, recently. And that meant this wasn't over. It meant someone still returned. Someone who maybe left food, or worse, came back to remember. The team collected every piece of evidence, bagged the notebook, photographed the walls, and I stood at the doorway, staring into the woods, thinking maybe Lily never really escaped. Maybe she just moved deeper into the trees, where even memory couldn't reach. But I was going to find her, because someone had tried to erase her, and I wasn't going to let them. I couldn't sleep after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that scrawled message in the shelter, like it had been written not with ink, but with the weight of desperation itself. You almost found me. Please try again. It looped through my mind, over and over, as if Lily had whispered it into my ear personally. The local sheriff's office reviewed the findings, labeled the shelter inconclusive, and filed it under supplemental evidence. But I knew what that meant. The case would stall again. Another wall. Another closed file. But I wasn't finished, not when I was this close. So I went back to the beginning. Not the night she vanished, but the days before, her last week at school. The people she'd spoken to, the classes she skipped, the library books she checked out. I requested the school's archived logs from 1997, and it took days of combing through fading papers and microfilm reels, but finally I saw it. A visitor's signature in the school's sign-in ledger 3 days before Lily disappeared. The name was scribbled quickly, almost carelessly, but clear enough. A.D. Relis. I didn't recognize it. Neither did Warren. And it wasn't a relative, not on record. No reason for them to be there. I searched the name through local directories, utility bills, property records, nothing. A ghost. But then I thought to search it through employee rosters from that era. Not at the school. At the grain processing plant 3 towns over. That's where the name reappeared. Alec Drellis. Maintenance technician. Employed from 1992 to 1999. Terminated for unauthorized facility use. That's all it said. I stared at the word use for what felt like hours. I drove out to the old plant myself. It had been shut down for years, fenced off with rusted signage and broken lights, but the buildings were still there, like empty lungs waiting to breathe in something terrible. I found a way in through the fence and explored the warehouse grounds until I came to the Far East building. Inside was dark, even at noon. Dust hung in the air like breath that never left. And in the far corner, half obscured by a fallen beam and a collapsed ceiling panel, was a metal hatch, smaller than the silo entrance, but the same build, same rust, same quiet. I didn't open it. Not alone, but I marked it on my map and took photos. I sent everything to Warren, and his reply was just one word. Again. We didn't speak about it over the phone. We just agreed to meet. And that night, as I sat alone in my car watching the sun go down behind the twisted husk of that factory, I felt it, like Lily was still there somehow. Or like someone else was watching me through the slats in the broken windows. I started the engine, but I didn't drive away. Not yet. Not until I was sure that wherever she had been taken, wherever she had been hidden, her story would not end with silence. Because something in this town still remembered her. And now, so would the rest of the world. They came out with it during a quiet Thursday morning press conference, the kind where the reporters don't bother with flashy headlines or camera angles, because the truth is heavier than any dramatization could be. I watched it unfold from a folding chair at the back of the room, clutching a flash drive like it was something holy. What they found in that second hatch, the one beneath the east building of the shuttered grain facility, was not a body, not bones, not Lily, but it was proof. Proof that someone used that space. For weeks, maybe months. Scraps of fabric, ash from fires. Old food tins with 1997 expiration dates. A bracelet blue plastic, the kind they handed out at county fairs back then. Etched on the inside were 3 letters scratched in with something jagged. LH. That was the moment the room fell still. Because even without remains, that was enough to reopen the case. And in that stillness, they brought out the drone footage again, the part that hadn't been made public. Not the part showing the hatch or the collapsed wall, but a grainy thermal image captured before the drone landed, before the full sweep of the silo. A figure, small, humanoid, standing just inside the tree line, and then gone. I was asked not to discuss that footage, not until it was verified. But Warren slipped me a copy, and I stared at it for hours. Because it looked like Lily, or the ghost of her, or maybe just a trick of resolution and desperation, blending into something we all wanted to see. Still, it changed everything. A week later, I attended a new memorial service at the Hart family farm. They'd cleared a space near the silo, paved a circle of stone and grass, and planted 13 sunflowers in a tight ring, one for each of the other missing girls across the state whose cases never made the news. Lily was no longer just a photo on a milk carton. She was a name, a sound, a ripple. The town showed up in full. People I hadn't seen in years. Former classmates, old teachers, the postman who used to give us butterscotch candy, the librarian who swore Lily had checked out the same book 3 times. I gave a small speech. I didn't plan it. I just spoke about memory, about how sometimes it lives in places the body cannot go, about how silence does not mean absence. And as I stepped away from the microphone, I saw her mother, gray now and smaller than I remembered, hold something in her palm. It was the blue bracelet, cleaned, pressed against her chest like it was still warm. The last thing I remember was the wind picking up, brushing through the sunflowers. I swear they turned, just slightly, all of them leaning in one direction, toward the trees, toward whatever is still waiting to be found.